This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is a speaker, author, coach, and communications consultant. Her story is inspiring, and her journey continues to inspire others. She is the founder of Simply Leap, Hudson Valley Women in Business, and she is a good friend of everyone I know and an awesome person. Please welcome Lauree Ostrovsky. Welcome, Lauree.
Oh, thank you so much.
I've had the pleasure about hearing your name all the time.
Oh.
I work with several of your biggest fans, Katie Haynes and Merritt Minnemeyer and Cecile, and I'm not going to try to pronounce her last name, but I think everybody knows who Cecile is here,
yes,
right?
Yes, yes.
And so many others that just speak so highly of you, your professionalism, your character, and the things that you're doing here in the Hudson Valley. So I'd love to hear, since we're starting with that, a little bit about Hudson Valley Women in Business, and then I'd love to jump into your journey because it's quite an extremely crazy, exciting journey. Lots of twists and turns. So stay on for a second here, but just listen to Hudson Valley Women in Business and what she's doing there.
So Hudson Valley Women in Business, like many business ideas, came out of solving my own challenge. So I'm from the Hudson Valley originally and I was in Manhattan and Washington, D.C. for 15 years. When I moved back, I knew my parents and a friend from high school, and needed to meet, and already owned my own business, had a home office, and was like, I need to create my own circle. As a business owner, especially someone who works from home, you have to find your circle. It's not like, you're in a cube, and you can talk to the person next to you. You've got to create your own circle. So I really consciously thought about who I wanted to connect with now that I was back in this area and didn't know anybody. And I wanted to connect, with other business owners, because as business owners, I think that we think about time differently. I could meet you at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday and not be, stuck in a corporate environment. Entrepreneurship has more fluidity. And so I really wanted to be around other business owners. And then I really wanted to be around women business owners because I feel that women do business differently. There's just a different approach to what we bring to the work that we do, how we work with clients and customers. And so I went out looking for other women who own businesses, and it turns out that they were looking for each other too. So this community, which is now over 3,000 members throughout the Hudson Valley, started with me saying, hey, how about next Monday? Who wants to get together? And we really formed, so many folks tell you, business experts tell you, go in with a plan. And so much of I always joke that if I was going to write another memoir, it would be, so I guess I'm doing this now, because this community really happened in kind of a backwards way, which is solved a problem, realized other people wanted it. And then when the Poughkeepsie Journal called, I thought, oh no, I need a website. So that way, if they do this story on me, somebody be able to find it. So I literally I came up with a name. I bought the website, and built one page the night before the story came out.
Wow.
So it's true
entrepreneurship.
Yeah, exactly.
Build the plane while we're flying.
Exactly. I guess that's more of a true business story. But yeah, so we are an incredible community of women at every stage of business ownership.
And is this a non-for-profit? Is it a for-profit? How does it work?
Yeah. So right now, It is a for-profit. It is an arm of Simply Leap.
Okay.
So it's an arm of my larger business.
So it's kind of like a community organization that you're running.
Exactly.
And basically the for-profit pays the bills is essentially what it does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
kind of like Michael Esposito Inc. over here.
Yeah. Keeping it real. Once you look at tax implications, you're like kind of looking at how that works. But actually we are taking on a fiscal sponsor because we realize that there are aspects of the work that we're doing as a community supporting the growth of entrepreneurship for women and young women that has a nonprofit component to it. So it seemed easiest for us to move towards fiscal sponsorship as well.
What is fiscal sponsorship?
Oh, yeah. So education-wise,
this is great. I'm learning something here.
So you can, when you're forming your organization, you can choose nonprofit, you can get your 501c3, or you can, the different levels of business, LLC and C Corp and things like that. Or you can work with a nonprofit organization who already has their 501c3, who already has their nonprofit status, and they can take you on as a fiscal sponsor. And what that means is if you raise money, let's say for a scholarship or a specific event, it in a legal way, it funnels through theirs. And I don't mean it's, underhanded.
I understand.
It legally funnels through their 501c3. They have a separate account with your business's name on it. And you set up with them, this is exactly what I'm raising the money for. It is not paying the for-profit side of the business. This is what we're going to use it for. So they then write it off on a tax level of what that money's being used for. And they then send it over to you to use for that specific reason.
Right.
But then you don't claim it in the same way because you don't have the 501c3.
That's excellent. What I think would help a little more clarity would maybe be, do you have maybe a real world example of how that could work?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, the way that we're going to be doing is that we're starting a scholarship. We're starting a scholarship for young women who are entrepreneurial and graduating high school or college. We want to,
And the scholarship is in the name of Hudson Valley Women in Business. That's what I was trying to get. Okay.
Right. So we want to raise that money and to give it as part of some of our main events. So we want to raise that money. We want people to feel like they can donate to it and get that write-off, get that tax deductible write-off that you would
because
when
you're the name that they recognize. These people that you're going out to, they're recognizing Hudson Valley Women in Business, so that's why they're donating the money to it.
Right.
But then, in order for it to be taxed as a non-for-profit, that's where that sponsorship comes in.
Right, and also it's a benefit to our donors. So and it's likely our members who will become donors as well, because it's like, oh, I feel so strongly about what this community has done for my business. I want to give back to newer generations of young women to do this as well. And I'm going to feel even better about it because I can then write it off at the end of the year as well as a donation. Because as soon as you're working with a fiscal sponsor or some kind of nonprofit status, that tax deductible thing is then possible for your donors.
That's really cool. That's I won't get too much into detail of what we're doing at Den 10 because one, that's not what this is all about, and two, I don't have enough information to share. But more in terms of questions. But at Den 10, the insurance company, is that we're trying to align with different non-for-profits as well. But that's more just because we want to give back to our community.
Right.
But I never thought of it I never knew about this. Yeah. So I thought, I'm going to build out the Den 10 Foundation as a 501c3 because I need to, but maybe I don't have to do that, I guess. I guess there's a couple ways I could do it.
Right. You don't have to, at least not immediately, if you really want to try it out and see how it looks. I mean, because that's really what our thought is.
It's maybe getting a fiscal sponsor for the insurance company, right?
Right, exactly. And so for a project that you guys are doing, some kind of fundraising event that you're doing or project, like you can get a fiscal sponsor for that project and still be a for-profit company.
Entity. Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. I love this. This is why I did the podcast. I mean,
learn interesting things.
I started this podcast when I was working at a company, and it was because I wanted to learn how to become an entrepreneur. So I was like, well, why not interview entrepreneurs? Then I became one, and I was like, all right, what else am I going to learn? So I'm so excited to learn about fiscal sponsorship, and I hope our listeners are also learning about that too.
And I should say, if any of your listeners know something more, which they likely do, than what I just said, please feel free to reach out to me and to you to let us know what else we should know about this as a choice.
I hope our listeners know more. And if you do, get on the show. Come on. I know that they do. They smart group of people we have here that we're inspiring. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go into your story here.
Yeah.
I think Hudson Valley Women in Business is certainly part of your story, but it spawns from this background that you have, this journey that you've experienced in life. And rather than me sharing it, I'd like you to go ahead and take us back into time.
Sure. So the thing that you should know about me, and actually the clients I end up working with, is that I'm an A student, and that an A student is, in my mind, so I'm going all the way back to third grade. I'm going to start there with my story.
Oh my goodness.
So third grade, for those of you who I self-identify as A students as well, it's not necessarily about your grades. It's about, this comfort in third grade that I knew exactly what was required. It was the rules were on the board, that I knew exactly what was required in order to succeed, in order to get the gold star, the pat on the back. And that as an adult, I still look for that. I go to my dentist and want them to recognize that I've been flossing.
Oh my goodness, me too.
Right, that is totally an A student choice, right? We just want to know.
But I was not an A student.
Right, no, but there's that structure that we go, where is the marker that I can be judged against, and I know that I can achieve it? What is we were talking about before we went live, deadline driven. It's if there's a deadline, I'm going to reach it. If there's a goal line, I'm going to know what I'm aiming for. And the dentist's office is one of those places. So I kind of had this in me, and I basically was doing everything that my parents, managers, teachers wanted me to do and were proud of me for. I was working in the corporate world, working in marketing in the city, had my 401k in my 20s, and was dating the guy that my mom loved. And then I went to the doctor for a very routine ear infection and found out that it was not at all an ear infection, that it was actually a brain tumor. And at 28, you don't really think about that being an option. I mean, at any age, it's still a surprise, but I was still in the moment of, life is still opening up. And then suddenly in this moment, I'm sitting in a doctor's office looking at an MRI footage of this white blob that in my skull that wasn't supposed to be there. And it was the moment I think that many of us have at different times in our lives where the path we thought we were on takes this unforeseen turn. And there's no way to turn back. I have no idea what's going to happen after this turn, and I have to take it. So that really propelled me. That propelled me forward in a way that I couldn't have imagined. And I stopped being some of the, A student, make parents proud kind of thing. I ended up, I ended up with 3 surgeries, meningitis, being in the hospital for a month, just a really difficult, treacherous.
3 back-to-back surgeries? They were all the same?
All within 2 months of each other.
Wow.
So I had the first surgery and then 1 month
in the
later,
another
one, and then meningitis, which caused a third surgery 4 or 5 days after the second one. So yeah, it was a situation I couldn't have imagined. And through that process, like the tough things that happen in our lives, whatever they are, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about what I had control over and what I didn't. And having lived through the pandemic as well, most of us can understand in a big way, what it means, what we have control over, which is not a lot, not as much as we'd like to convince ourselves on a day-to-day basis. We have control over what we think about what's happening, how we talk about what's happening, the people we surround ourselves with, and ultimately the actions or the choices we make out of the situation. Everything else out of our control. And when a big thing happens like this did in my life, my brain tumor, I realized that on a gigantic level. And that was the moment, actually, I was in the hospital at the time when I decided to become a coach and to help other people recognize what we have control over and to focus as much of our energy as there, because it's actually really powerful. What you think about something completely changes it. The words that you use are incredibly powerful. And so that was, I quit my job after that. I ended my relationship. I moved to a new city. I started traveling. I mean, there was so much incredible things that happened. And another thing was that I started my business helping other people create more meaning in their life, because life is just so precious. I mean, I don't have to tell you that, but I found this in such a big way, and I guess at a fairly young age, that my life trajectory just took a completely different turn.
And you went through that so quickly, because that journey didn't just happen overnight.
No. I mean, yeah, exactly.
A couple things that you speak to there. I think the first thing I want to just touch on is when you're talking about these goal posts and meeting these different, making sure that our dentist knows that we flossed. We're speaking about our integrity. We're speaking about like what we stand for. And I said I'm going to do this by X date. And so it's in my integrity to get it done by this date. I learned that through my coach. And I didn't always have that in me. And I think that that's important for people to hear, because I think, and as a coach, you know this, right? Is that just because we did it one way in our past doesn't mean it has to continue that way.
Right. That isn't who we are.
That's not who we are. And so I was not an A student. I had the potential to be an A student. My parents always said that. That's why they always got mad at me. You were definitely the kid I cheated off of. I was really smart to do that, right? But I was a C student. I was a B student. I really didn't put much effort into school, and I didn't understand why people maybe didn't respect me the way that I wanted to be respected.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I learned about integrity and learning about sticking to my integrity, right? When I say I'm going to do something, when I say I'm going to be somewhere, by doing that and being there. And learning that part of integrity is not just hitting that goalpost, but letting people know in advance if something's going to change. And so you and I have had that experience together, actually, in that we had the Take Action event that we were going to do.
Right.
And it was in my integrity to follow through with it and push as hard as I could to make sure we had enough people to be at the event that you and I and other panelists were going to be a part of. But when I learned that it just wasn't going to happen, it was also in my integrity to call you in advance and let you know ahead of time, hey, listen, here's where we're at. And while it was a little bit later than I wanted, I still was pushing as hard as I could. It's still in our integrity. And I think that's the lesson that I want to share with our entrepreneurs that are listening and our business leaders, is that we're talking about integrity. So flossing your teeth for your dentist, it's not about the dentist, it's about standing by your own integrity.
Right.
The other question that I actually have for you is, you condensed about a 5-year journey into about 3 sentences. And I know that you said while you were in the hospital is when you decided to become a coach. But I think that you had a lot more insight prior to that decision. And my question lies in, where did that insight come from? Who were some of the people that were maybe inspiring to you in that moment that you were like looking up to and saying, there's got to be more, or there's got to be something else, and what's my path? Because I don't think we wake up and say, I'm going to become a coach. Right. There is something that has led you there, or somebody who inspired you to go there. So let's take that moment right there and let's break that down into, what was the time frames? Where were you? How did that all feel? How did that come about?
Yeah, sure. So it actually was 1 year prior that I'd learned what coaching was. So
prior to even being diagnosed?
Yes.
Wow.
So let's say I was 26 or something when it, and I was working in this corporate marketing job, and one of my colleagues started studying coaching. And as anyone who's gone through some kind of consulting or coaching program, you usually need guinea pigs. You usually need like your first couple clients to say like, oh, can I try out how to coach on you? And so I agreed. And so we would meet like in one of the little offices in our office every other week or so. And one of the things that I was struggling with at that time was that I had a sense that this wasn't the job for me. I had a sense that I looked to my managers and to the owner. I mean, it was a woman business owner. It was incredible. But like, I looked to them and I thought, this isn't who I want to be, meaning this is the kind of work that would be fulfilling for me, but I didn't know what the other thing or what the next thing would be. But I had art. Actually, I had minored in art in high school and in college, took a couple art classes in the city when I was there and working, and never thought of myself as an artist. And if there are any folks here that you'd mentioned that you were an aspiring writer, and if there are any folks who are listening who've been interested in art and writing and things like that, it can sometimes feel like there's a line between who you are and who gets to be a real one, like a real artist or a real writer, a real dancer, a real creative. And I really felt that. I felt like I wasn't, even if I had taken all these classes, I wasn't really an artist. So she and I had worked together on how do I bring art into my life, even if this is the work that I'm doing right now, even if I'm staying in my corporate job. And so, we were coming up with, trips to the farmer's market count as a creative expression because you're enjoying the different colors and shapes and textures there. How can you bring it into your daily life, the way you're dressing or the way that you're communicating with people? And then we kind of got really creative and we looked at the environment that I was in. They allowed at this job, they were incredibly generous with their staff. And we had, instead of days off or something, we each received a bank of days. And you could apply them to, sickness, or you could apply them to vacation. You could accumulate them. And she's like, well, what if you used them all at once? And nobody had ever asked for that before. And so she and I devised this way that I then presented to my managers at the time, at 26, of taking a sabbatical. And I negotiated with them. I said, I'd like to take 6 weeks. I only have 4 weeks in this bank of days. What if we did that and you didn't pay me for the other 2 weeks? And they came back and they said, well, actually, legally, we talked to an HR person. Legally, we have to pay you and you just keep working after that. And I was like, oh, I will take another paycheck. That's fine. Sure. So I went on a 6-week sabbatical, traveling Europe at 26 by my own design, having worked with this coach to say, anything is possible. And I think that anything is possible. The being open to that, really was one of my first leaps. And, so my business is named Simply Leap. Leaps aren't necessarily simple all the time, but there is this kind of simple joy, recognition inside of the desire to leap it is kind of simple to tap into. And this was definitely my first leap at the sabbatical. And to think that 1 year later, I was in a hospital bed, it gives me chills now, and I lived through it, But one of the things that my coach at the time, Susan, had told me was, you might think about coaching. Back when I was working with her, she was like, I feel like you'd be really good at it. And I filed it away. I didn't even think about it again until I was sitting in a hospital bed for the third time. I was in the ICU. And do you want me to tell you the whole story?
Sure.
Okay.
Were you still, when this was all happening, by the way, the diagnosis, the hospital bed, you're still working at the corporate job?
Yes. Okay. And
Okay.
what I'll say is, I don't know how much you believe in serendipity and things, but
Sure, of course.
It was...
I'm in a hypnosis class right now.
Yay. All right.
Serendipity is part of my life right now.
Interview topic will be hypnosis. Okay. So I was meant to be at this work. I had this sabbatical because of my own choices and putting it out there and asking for it, scarily asking my bosses for this opportunity, but also because they had created this structure to allow you to ask for those things. And strangely enough, the woman who owned that business lost her husband the same year of my sabbatical from a brain tumor. So 1 year later, I come to her and I say, I was just diagnosed with a brain tumor, and it happened that she had bought the health insurance that was the platinum because she was dealing with that in her family. And of the 3 surgeries, $500,000, it probably was all, I paid $5,000.
Wow.
$5,000 over, this entire period, including all the doctor's appointments. And so, right, maybe even less than that.
This corporate job and this employer you're speaking about then, was this independently owned of some sort?
Yeah, it was independently owned by a group of, I think, 8 people who had come together from another larger corporate entity and then created their own own organization.
Wow,
so,
how fortunate.
It was incredible. So I also had a mentor in what business ownership can look like. Even though I didn't decide to be a business owner for years later, but having that design, like the way that they thought about serving their staff and creating openness for possibility and to make it work for each person who is in that company, and even down to the insurance that they had chosen, that kind of thoughtfulness and conscientiousness, I feel like that's part of my work, not realizing, sometimes we don't realize where those things come from. You're talking about integrity. I'm sure there are a lot of people in your life where that word suddenly, had meaning to you. There was a lot that I gained there. There was a reason why I needed to be there. And one was health insurance. And so I'm going to be forever grateful for that. But yes, this was the corporate environment, the same company that I was with. And just a month or two, a couple months after my surgeries, I went in and I gave notice, and people were crying. People were supportive. Those bosses still reach out to me years later. I mean, it's been 20 years now, and they still reach out, and there's still a connection there.
It's incredible. I think we're going to go back to women in business and the importance of that because of what you just said there. I think it's that person that you're able to mirror, that you have that person there. And I think that's why it's so important when we talk about leaders in business coming from different cultures, backgrounds, ethnicities, genders, all of this that we're speaking about, the importance of it is because they are the trailblazers. They are the ones where someone like you, who you don't know what you're going to learn from this experience in this corporate environment. And like you said, you didn't know you were going to be a business owner. You didn't know anything, but you did know that there was a woman who was a business owner. Right. And you did know that through her experiences, you learned a lot. And I think and I think you would attest to this too, that it opened to your eyes that you could do that too. And it allows for that. I think about that with my daughters. I think about that just in life in general, is that if you have that person there that's like, I could do that. I could be that person. Oh
my gosh, we need people who look like us, or we need people who we can look up to and see the different ways it can look. Because business owners, I mean, as you know, and from the people you've interviewed and anyone in our circle, business owners look different. They design their businesses differently, and we need those examples to know what ours could be like. Yeah, even now.
And to say, I can do that too, which is tremendous. And I think that's why we're seeing such a big shift in the corporate world and in the business world of all the different people and all the differences that they all have moving into leadership roles. And I think that's the importance of seeing somebody at a managerial level who is looking different than what's been the norm. And then even in the ownership level and all that, the same. And I've had female entrepreneurs come on and talk about that, of sitting in the boardroom and it's all men.
Yeah,
and I mean, I'm a man, and I want a seat at the board table too.
Yeah.
But I'm speaking more about just the importance of it. And I think that when we go back to Hudson Valley Women in Business, for a little shift here for a second, the importance of that organization to support each other to have that happen. I don't think your intention is that it's only women in business and that's all that takes over the world. That's not your intention. Your intention is to support this, and then to kind of set the path for others, for other women, for the little girls right now that are growing up, to see an example of a business owner, and a good example. Yeah. You mentioned conscientious, and having that consciousness, of that self-awareness, which you have, which is probably what your coach saw in you originally, that self-awareness. And in that your business owner had as well, to be conscious of their employees. And that's another great thing that you're doing at Hudson Valley Women in Business, is that these are all business owners that aren't just slapping their name on a wall and saying, hey, I own a business. Right. It's putting it together and thinking about the impact that they have on their community, right? Yeah,
I would say absolutely. I feel like what is similar between the, I guess, two businesses kind of that I run, this community and then Simply Leap, is that my job is to create a container. And as a coach, when I'm working one-on-one or when I'm running a retreat or a workshop, I'm creating a container that my clients feel held in and feel it's spacious enough where they can explore and look at new things or look at new perspectives that they wouldn't have before. Could I close my business and open another one? Could I take on another employee? Could I launch this product that I don't know anything about, but could I figure it out? Yeah, absolutely. There's this safe place that you have to create for people in order to kind of vulnerably see where they are or see what's holding them back, in order to really balloon and go out there and expand and build confidence and clarity. And I think our community, Hudson Valley Women in Business, does the same thing. It is a container because business ownership is vulnerable. It is scary. It is unknown. Every day is a new thing, is likely a new thing that you did not plan for or you don't know how to do, that you have to figure out right now in this moment or within the next 30 minutes. We've had that conversation. And that is business ownership. And sometimes that's exciting. Sometimes it's terrifying. Sometimes it's both, and you can't tell the difference. And it's really nice to be around other people who get exciting and terrifying, who get those two things. And I would say, and all the emotions that happen in between them. And I would say that we talk about the loneliness of business ownership a good deal, which is why coming together feels so good. You really get it. Oh my God, you get what it's like. Because I can have supportive people in my life who are like, that's great for you. I don't really know what it is, but okay, there you go with your business. But then there's around other people who are like, yeah, I know what it's like to look at QuickBooks and go, oh God, what is this? How do I figure this out? Or what are all the things I have to think about when I hire my first employee, or expand in this, or own my first building? What are those things that I have to think about around pricing? Or are people going to accept that I've raised my prices? There are these things that are on your shoulders, and to be around other people who get like genuinely what it's like to have that, because they feel it too, is just priceless. And I would say women add an extra level to that, because there are circles, chambers and things like that already exist. But I think in mixed company, it may change how people can how vulnerable people can feel like about sharing. I think that we create a safe environment. What we were saying in the beginning, I was saying about creating a container. If you create a really safe place, then people can say, I don't know, and still be powerful and still feel empowered, and still feel like, oh, everybody respects me still. I can say I don't know, or help me, or I'm scared of this new situation that I'm in, this new leap that I'm taking in my business, and feel like everyone's still holding you as powerful and capable. That there aren't that many places as an adult where we have those safe places to explore and to be vulnerable at the same time. And I feel like those are the two, in all my work, it's about that.
And I think we all experience that, I experience it, I'll get on a call and I don't know something, and I'm sitting there going, should I raise my hand and say, I don't know what they're talking about right now? Right. I'm the business owner and they're speaking to me right now. And I need to know what's going on, Right. So we all experience it. And so it's nice to know that, you form a safe place for these people. But I think the lesson out of that too is that we all experience it. And you do need to raise your hand. And at a certain point, you need to not care right? Like you need to just go, you know what, I don't care what anybody else thinks of me. But you have to be cautious, that you certainly, have a reputation that you want to make sure you uphold. But I think authenticity comes into that as well, of like just being an authentic person, of saying, hey, when I don't know something, I ask. And when I know something, I share.
Yeah.
And doing all of that. You were mentioning the fact of you were in the ICU and you were thinking while you were in the ICU. And,
yes. Oh, great. Great. Segue back. Yeah. Yes. So, so I had these, so I went in thinking I was going to have one surgery, and I woke up out of surgery number 2. I'm sorry. I woke up out of surgery number 1 with the neurosurgeon bending down saying to me, good news, we got 60% of the tumor. So those are the first words I heard after the first surgery. And I thought, I know math well enough.
See, as a C student, I'm like, right, we're good, right? So you A+ students, you screwed yourself up here.
Yeah. So it was that moment I knew I had to go back. And so and then the unthinkable, meningitis is this terrible bacterial infection. So basically half of my head was swollen and, my skin taut to the touch. It was like one half of my face and head was ballooned to the point where you couldn't see any wrinkles on my face. And I also was hallucinating through the early stages of meningitis. And then they had to do another surgery to flush the inside of my brain with antibiotics. So following that surgery, I was in the ICU for another, 10, 12 days. And it was then, as I was recuperating, that I had this epiphany, I guess you would call it. So there was this day where, the side of my face was so swollen. And what had happened is that my face had swollen like that the 2 previous surgeries. And at each time I had required a spinal tap, which if anyone has had one of those, I don't recommend it. It is, they insert a needle into the bottom of your spine and they suck the fluid that's like filling up your face through your spine and out the bottom. Right. Just painful, terrible. So that was the only way that they had gotten this excess fluid that was filling my face and brain out the 2 previous surgeries. So as I was laying in the ICU for the 3rd time, a nurse came in one morning, and I must have felt pretty good that day because I asked her, hey, what's this thing lying next to me on the pillow? So here I am, face swollen, half swollen, and there's this disc, this round cylinder on the pillow next to me, connected into the incision on the right side of my ear, next to my ear. And she's like, oh, that's a drain. And I looked at her like, seriously? Like, that's a drain?
Like a drain, like a sink drain?
Right. And I look at her and I'm like, you mean all of this around my face, like that fluid is supposed to go into that cylinder that's right next to me on the pillow? And she's like, yeah, that's where it's supposed to go. It's supposed to drain through this incision, and through this little tube into this container. And I had never thought to ask that question before. And when she said it, I had this moment of realization, because sometimes as an A student, I can try so hard to be good that I can get in my own way. So I was so desperate to be a good patient, to do the right things, and to get the heck out of the hospital as quickly as possible, that I thought anything that was attached to me, the moment they took it off, that meant I was succeeding. That was an A. And so this thing had been attached to me before. I didn't know what it was, but when they took it off, I thought, oh, that's good. It had never worked before. And suddenly in this moment, I was like, wait, am I part of the problem here that this drain isn't working? That 2 previous times, and now this 3rd time, this drain that's connected to my incision is not draining. And I'm desperate to get this thing unhooked. So I thought as she kind of left, I was like, I think I know what to do, in this clarifying way that I'd never had before. And And I was like, I think I'm going to let the drain work.
And that was it.
And the drain worked. That day took about 8 hours. Slowly but surely, it drained. And I didn't need a spinal tap.
And it never drained before.
It had never drained before. And it was this, the nurse came in a few times during that day. As it was working, she had to keep changing the drain because it was filling. And she and I had these looks to each other like, it's really working. And you can say whatever you want. You can say angels, you can say I manifested, you can say science, whatever. But it really felt to me like this moment of realizing we can get in our own way and we can get out of our own way. And our bodies are really powerful. So, when we get out of our body's way, they can do the thing that they know how to do, which is to get well, to take care of, to take care of ourselves. And so that was the moment I realized how powerful that we all are, that our thoughts are really powerful. And in my desperate attempt to control my environment from this tiny hospital bed, I was actually getting in the way of what was really possible, which was healing and so much more. And so that was the deciding moment for me that I wanted to do this for a living. I wanted to help people see how powerful they are, even in what they think, and especially in seeing how they hold themselves back and to get out of their own ways. So that propels me all the time in the work that I'm doing. And I think it definitely propels me in the community of women business owners as well. We are really powerful when we work together, of any gender. We are very powerful when we work together. And as much as we can get out of our own way to do that, I want to help people do.
Mm-hmm. I like that, the letting go. My coaches and I, we speak about that so often. I brought up merit, but I also am in a coaching program with Melanie McCool, who does self-hypnosis. And it's similar. The hypnosis side is very similar to what you're speaking about letting things be. Yeah. And I remember, oh boy, his name just escaped me, Dr. something, but I think you'll know who it is in a second, or it'll come to me in a second. But just letting things be, just being. And it's like part of the Taoism, just being. He had a funny story. If I could remember his name, he's since passed, but I remember him telling a funny story about his son, because he would go up and speak about this so often, and he'd say, just be, just be, just be. And he told his son, hey, you have all these chores to do. And he said, Dad, I'm just being. It was like such a good one. His name will come to me. It doesn't matter. But anyway, just going back to this whole story that you're sharing here, so significant to the business owners, to the business leaders, to anybody in a managerial position, or anybody just climbing the corporate ladder, or wherever you are in your journey, in your career, is you have to put in the work, right? Everybody knows this, that when we're talking about just being and letting things go and getting out of your own way, we're not saying
don't do anything.
Lay in bed.
Yeah. Right. No, you got to be out in the world.
You got to be working. You got to be doing it all. But it's also allowing things to come to you, and allowing things to take a life of their own. You mentioned the example of somebody with QuickBooks, right? So they pull up the QuickBooks screen. So here's the work. They got to open up QuickBooks. They got to plug things in. Yeah. But eventually, they also have to let it go. And they have to kind of let it has its own formulas. Let the formula work. Don't try to create your own. Let the formula work. As you learn through that formula, maybe you do create your own formula in there. I don't know QuickBooks really, but I'm just saying when you work with the product, work with whatever it is that you're doing, and then allow it to develop. I see that with employees. You give them the training, you give them the guidance, and then you got to let them be alone for the next 8 hours. Because if you're on them, they are going to be disgusted with you.
Well, that, and they're also not going to learn, because most of us end up doing something our own way in some way. Right. And so it's like, okay, I've given you all the tools. I'm sure parenting is the same. I've given you all the tools, but your version of this, is different. Even in my business, is going to be different. Yeah. And I have to be okay with that. As a business owner, handing over anything to someone else is a process of letting go. this is going to look different if you write my social media instead of me writing my social media. If you handle customer service and I'm not handling it anymore, it is going to look different. If I've given a good structure, some guidelines, and if I taught you the QuickBooks and the whatever the formula is, then at least it's going to, it still should work. But your brand of whatever that is still going to come in for my business. And so as an employer, as the boss, as the person with the name on the door, as my old boss used to say, like, there's a lot of pressure in that letting go piece, but there's also a lot of potential. And that is so similar to what happened in the hospital room for me, that there's so much more potential if you let your body do what it's meant to do, or if you let employees take it and run, because they will come up with new ideas you hadn't thought of. They will interact with people in a way that you couldn't. They will come back to you with suggestions and improvements that you wouldn't have had time to do before, or you wouldn't have seen in the same way because you weren't part of those interactions. And so there's a lot more. Your growth, your business growth is dependent on you trusting other people.
I'm so happy you said the word trust, because the whole time we're talking about this, I was thinking that's the one word that we're leaving out that is key to all of this, is it's trusting that partner, that person, that employee. It's that trust in them. Because when you let go and then you put that trust in them is when I think that they can truly excel. Yeah. Because without that trust, so you can let go and you can give the work to the partner. But if that trust isn't there, then they're trying to please you. They're trying to make sure they don't get in trouble with you. And so they truly aren't being the creative person that you have hired them to be. But when you give them that trust and you say, hey, look, do what you do, it just expands and their creativity comes out, and that trust. And then you don't have to be watching them all the time, because you know that it's happening. And that same thing with that trust in that drain. Yeah. Trusting that the drain is there to help you, trusting that the drain is there to work for you, and letting it go and letting it be is what allowed you to do that. I think it's so amazing what comes out of that story there. I'm interested in your hallucinations. Oh,
that was very interesting. So, what was I? Well, so I would say the scariest one.
Was it like daydreaming? Like what are hallucinations like?
Yeah. So this was, and I'm curious if anyone else has something to say, but mine were, I would say the scariest one is that I thought other people were in the room. So I would hear other things that weren't happening. So I heard something that sounded like someone washing dishes. And I was in the hospital at the time. And so I thought, oh, do we have a sink in here? Is somebody here? And I'd ask the person who was in the room with me, like, oh, is somebody washing dishes? And no, they weren't. Nobody was there. And I think that, that freaked out the person who was in the room with me. But, luckily the person in the bed is a lot less scary for them. It's like, okay. But I would say that, interestingly, dreaming was really interesting because, I've never had a dream of flying except in this time. So I flew a lot in my dreams, or I guess hallucinations at the time, but my brain was working differently at that time. So I would be flying, but then I would dive down really close to grains of wheat or grass and kind of run my hands over the texture of it. So I just had these or really close to a cat's fur. It was very close to textures and the vibrancy of blades of grass and things like that. So I had incredibly rich dreams. And then the hallucinations while awake was more like I would, I guess, make up sounds, or I'd make up stories about what those sounds were, and wasn't quite sure who else was there with me.
Have you ever looked into what any of this meant?
No. I mean, no, not at all. I just thought it was fascinating.
I think it is fascinating. And, we talk about serendipity and everything. And in this moment, you're also deciding that you're going to become a coach. Yeah. And so I wonder if any of these dreams had any play in that. I've always had dreams of flying. So I find that interesting that you didn't. Yeah. I think that we always think that whenever something happens to us, it happens.
Right, exactly.
It's kind of like the little ego.
Yeah, and I've
there.
never had one since.
Really?
You know what I mean? It's not like that door opened and suddenly I'm doing it now. It was like, it was that moment in time. Which is.
I love dreams of flying, except for when I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I can't fly. It's always these like takeoffs from like rooftops, or like I'm jumping from something, or I'm just taking off, and it's like, and it feels so real that when you wake up, you're like, wait a minute,
didn't happen?
I can't. The one that really threw me for a loop, this is really going off topic for a second here, but I was best friends with LeBron James. I'm a big basketball fan. And I was best friends with...
That would be such a bummer to wake up
It was a bummer, because in my dream, I was really best friends with him. And I woke up and I was just like, wait a second.
Wait, was he flying too?
No, this wasn't a flying dream. But he does fly on the court.
That's right.
No, it wasn't a flying dream. We were just best friends. We were just really good friends. We played ball together. And I woke up and I was just like, wait a second. I am not friends with him. I was really disappointed. And I had that happen to me years before when it was Michael Jordan. But, so I've experienced this.
Oh my gosh.
These hallucinations.
Sorry.
Just differently than you. All right. So you have now, in this moment that we're living in, this moment in time, have decided that you're going to become a coach, and you quit your job. What was that conversation like? Because now you have this supportive network, right? You have this business owner who has provided you the healthcare, who has provided you the mentorship, who gave you the sabbatical, which we didn't even get into that experience yet, which we're certainly going to jump into if I remember, who's done all of this. And so what's interesting about this question is that actually the event that I was talking about earlier, that Lauree was going to be a panelist on, is an event about being an entrepreneur, quitting your 9-to-5 business job, and then taking the leap to become an entrepreneur. So we were going to talk about this on the panel. We're still going to have this discussion, but we're going to have a little bit of it right now. And I think for our listeners here, some are in a position where they're climbing that corporate ladder. Wonderful. Stick with it. Keep doing what you're doing. And some are in a role very similar to what you were in, what I was in, where we know that we have more to offer, and the confinement of this business that we're in is not for us. It's a wonderful business, but it's not for us, and we need to take a different path. But that path, forget about being a business owner as being scary. That path is scary to make that choice and to walk into that office and let them know that you're leaving if you do it with the integrity that we've done it in. So my question is about that of, you had all this support, and then now you're going to say, hey, I'm going to be a coach. What was that like? How did you go about it? Tell us about that process there. Yeah.
So what I'll say about this is leaps aren't usually just one and done. There's usually a series. And that was really the case here. So I knew that my time was finished where I was. And part of it was my own health journey was that I needed to be home more, and they didn't have a work from home policy. This was 20 years ago. They didn't have a work from home policy. I was commuting to the city an hour and a half. I could not go back to commuting when I was still taking 2 naps a day, to try to recover. And so I knew I needed to shift. And I had a sense that this was, that coaching or somehow helping people around recognizing their own power and creating more meaning in their life. I knew that was part of the path forward. And I needed some space in order to make that move. And so how I quit at the time was recognize, well, what I'll say is it is easier to do scary things after facing a really scary thing. So potentially disappointing people is often why people don't quit. Like somebody's going to be disappointed, or, my family's going to be upset, or how am I going to support myself? Or I don't have all the answers yet. I can't do it yet until I have all the answers. There are these things that come up. Well, if you face something really tough, and I think most of us have, it doesn't have to be a brain tumor, but most of us have faced something scary enough. Well, is it that kind of scary, or is it just disappointing people scary? Because that's scary, but it's not quite in the same category. So suddenly that was more open up to me, that I could leave without having the answers, and it would be okay, whatever anybody else thought about this decision. So I needed to be okay with that. I needed to create some time. So what I did in the process of that conversation was saying that this is the time. This is time for me to move on. I think we knew this wasn't a fit. But I appreciate all of these things that you just listed that I received from this organization, and then created some space for myself, because as a business owner, as a potential business owner, if you think that you're going to make enough money the moment you leap into that business, you are going to be sadly disappointed and stressed out. So you need to create a pathway for that. So some folks stay in the work that they were doing until they build up this side business and can more seamlessly move from one to the other. Some folks, leap into it, but it's without creating that foundation first, and that's really hard. And so what I did was I actually moved into consulting work. So I started consulting in my current field, with an organization that was already working virtually with clients. So I could still do the marketing work that I was making money at on a schedule that made sense. And I could do it in a way where I learned how to be a business owner. I had to do my own taxes. I had to set up my own home office. I had to learn how to create hours at home. Like in my office, it's like, well, it's not 9 to 5 anymore. It's what hours I make it. So I did this incredible movement towards it. And then a couple years later, I realized it was time, because of the work that I was doing there was it needed to end. And then there was the next part of that leap. So in the interim, I actually went to art school because I'd always dreamed of it. So I went to art school. I took a year-long coaching certification.
What kind of art?
Oh, well, I went into a painting program,
Cool.
But it was drawing and painting. And then also took a coaching program at the same time. So I took a year-long certification and started working with clients and understanding how that business was going to be built, building up a cadre of clients that I was seeing and serving from my home office while doing this marketing consulting. And then realized I got to a point a couple years later, and I want to stress a couple years later, where I realized that I was doing so much for both pieces of work, that the marketing consulting and my coaching business, that if a great third option came to me, if like TED called to do a TED Talk, which was my dream at the time, that I couldn't say yes because I had no capacity. I had no extra capacity between building this side business and doing all of my main work. This was the moment that I was going to have to let the other stuff go, like let my marketing consulting go, and with the trust that I was going to build the rest of that business by focusing 100% on it. So I had built it successfully to a certain point and gave myself enough of a ramp. I'd saved enough for, let's say, 6 months or so where I could devote completely to building up the rest of the business. But I had also spent enough time, those couple years, to get it to this place that it had a solid structure. I had planted all of those seeds. I had spoken at different events. I had, gone to networking and things. And so I had a good referral system already that I could build from. So I guess I just want to stress that leaps are sometimes in process, and that if you allow your business in some way to build with steady effort, but without the pressure of this has to work right now, you are more likely to be creative and hopefully more successful as a result.
I want to ask you about TED. I was just like looking at my notes. I'm like, wait, I don't see TED anywhere in my...
You want to call them? Yeah. I didn't get called by them.
Don't worry.
But I'm still open.
Awesome, because we're in the same boat there. That's also a dream for me. So we'll talk offline about TED and TED Talks, and just for our audience here, if you don't know what TED Talks are, look them up on YouTube. Phenomenal. You're going to learn a tremendous amount from these speakers, these great speakers, and I know that one day you'll see Lauree on there too.
Yay!
And myself. And yes, but I understand exactly what you're saying with this whole TED Talk thing in building businesses, because I'm in a lot of transitions right now too. And there's one TEDx or TED Talk coach that I've signed up for his newsletters because he's always talking about it and everything. And this is a dream of mine as well. But I feel the same way as you. Is like, I'm like, I don't have time for his course. I'm like, I'm doing all this other stuff, but meanwhile, this is a dream of mine. So there's something there, right?
Yes,
there's
absolutely.
something there that needs to shift. But I want to go into a little bit more about what you just mentioned there that I think are some key things to take away from that. I wrote down adaptability, flexibility, creativity, and self-discipline, all attributes that are needed to be an entrepreneur, to be a business owner, to be able to do what you did. Yeah. If you're missing one of those, then start learning about it. Learn how you could be more flexible. Learn about all of these different things. I think all of those.
And notice in your role models who has those skills already. What does it look like in someone else who's self-disciplined? What does their version of it look like? We don't have to figure it out all for ourselves. So go ahead.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah. And the one that I think that we don't talk enough about is creativity. And I asked you said you're an artist, and I wanted to know what kind of art, because art, I've learned, takes on so many other forms than just painting, because that's the one that most people associate it with. And it's not to knock it in any way. Of course not, right? Like, I mean, painting is gorgeous, but people associate it to that. But art takes on all these other forms. I mean, this right now, what we're doing is art. This podcasting is art, all different ways.
Interview is an art. The notes that you're taking, there's an art form to keeping a conversation going.
Thank you. I'll take that one. So what I'm going with that, in that entrepreneurs and business owners and business leaders, you're artists, right?
Yes.
And part of art, where I'm going with this, is that stress that we're talking about, that we put on ourselves, these pressures of being successful, of seeing the business through. As an artist, and so now here's the question for you as an artist who paints, right? You might see your end picture in your mind, right? But every stroke, it can't just follow, right? You
it's
have
taking
to
you
allow,
in another direction. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And how many times do you have a picture in your mind, and when you really put the strokes in and you tell us, how many times does it really end up to be that final?
Oh, you're absolutely right. So what I would say is that, so I've worked with a number of writers and artists as well in my cadre of clients, whether formally so, or folks who have always aspired and have that dream in their life. And I think what links all artists in whatever medium that you work in together is the way you see the world. And that's why entrepreneurs and business leaders are also artists, because what you see in the world is, it could be colors and shapes and textures. Wow, this is a really special space, or as you said, painting or something or music that we're listening to. Did you hear the beat underneath that? Oh my God, there's that. But there's also nuance, that's all that is nuance in our lives, or if I change this one aspect of my business, what's possible in the other aspects of my business? It's changing on the fly, as you said, what you were saying about brushstrokes. I often have no idea what I'm going to paint going in. So much like how Hudson Valley Women in Business happened,
I was thinking that.
I go in with, how about this? Today. How about orange? And I like the unfolding, and so I seek out places that safe unfolding can happen, and a page, a blank page is one of those. A conversation is another. We don't know where this conversation is going to take us. We have some ideas, but it will be even better as a result than either of us can imagine. And that to me is exciting about being a business owner. I was talking before about terrifying and exciting at the same time. A blank page, whether you're a writer, artist, whatever, is terrifying and exciting at the same time. It's the same. And so I'll say, as we've just been talking about, business owners and leaders are creative, are artists in your own way. And I also say that there are more entrepreneurs in the world than realize they are. So artists are also entrepreneurs because you have to believe in your idea before anyone else does. And you have to stick by that idea. I'm thinking Van Gogh, who didn't even in his lifetime get the appreciation he has now. You have to stick by that idea well past anybody else. And I often put teachers and professors in that list as well, because they are the leaders in that classroom, in that space. You have to believe in your idea longer than anybody else in that room will. And so I think there's a lot of us out in the world who are blazing our own path, and creative in our own ways, and recognizing it. So no matter what happened to you in elementary school when someone commented on your artwork, know that you are still an artist. So, please, if you take nothing from this today, know that you are still an artist no matter what happened back then with your drawings.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And it's all about that creativity. Yeah. I think that's the whole thing, is the creativity and the experience of it all. You were reminding me of, so I journal. I was doing it much more consistently, but I recently did a journal entry, and it had to do with the experience of being an entrepreneur. In that that stress that we're talking about, that sometimes the burden that we have, if we look at it differently, if we look at it as an artist, as the experience of the painting, as the experience of the music or the play or whatever it is that we think of as art, but we look at our business as art, if we look at it as art and we look at it as the experience of being a business owner, the experiences that we go through, and those experiences are sometimes really great and awesome, and sometimes they really suck. There's also dark paintings and dark art too, right? Yeah. But they're part of that journey. They're part of that experience. And like you said, at the end, on the other side of that, that's what makes us who we are, makes us stronger, makes us better, makes us even more creative, more visions.
Makes people connect with you because they see something in themselves and you, or see someone who understands them. And that is a really strong connecting force.
Like so many other great speakers I have on this show, I know that we can go on for so much longer. There's so much more I want to speak with you about, like coaching and the importance of coaching, and how it's changed my life. I'm definitely a testament to having a coach, and actually multiple coaches at this time in my life now, and just it's such meaningful work, that work. But I do want to touch on your books.
Oh, okay.
Because that is like another big one for me. Yeah. And I do know that we're just going to have you back on. That's really about it. That's the bottom line here, because we're going to go 2 hours otherwise.
Talk with you.
Just real quick, as long as you'd like to go on this topic here about writing. You've written 2 books, 3 books?
I have written 4, but I've published 2.
You've published 2. But
publishing is a completely different conversation than writing.
Different conversation, but the question that I really have about is the self-discipline to write. Yeah. So I guess we go back to this whole creative and everything. And part of it is because I think so many of us have a book in us, right? Yeah. We all have a book in us. We all have this story that is worth sharing. Yep. And I think the question is, what was your process in writing? And I think everybody's going to have a different process, so there's no right or wrong, but I'm just interested in your process.
Yeah. So in the coaching and consulting world, having a book is like having a PhD. It's a calling card. It's an opportunity. You get more interviews like this having a book to talk about.
Well, I didn't even know you had a book. So. Yeah,
there you go. Well, but
I know what you mean. I'm just teasing.
Well, especially at that point in my career when I wrote it. And so it's like, I should probably write a book. So I kind of was like, but that takes a lot of work. And I have to give credit to another mentor at the time who was my college literature professor. And then he and I worked together hosting writing retreats later on. He had said he's worked with a bunch of writers who are writing and editing their books as well. And what he said was to go through all of my previous blog posts. And your journal entries might be an opportunity for that as well, depending on how you write them, and have a different a postcard or, note card for each one. So each blog post, I wrote the title of it on a card, and on the back, I put what I thought were a couple themes that had come through from that post. And each note card was a different blog post. And so what happened was I wrote them all out, I flipped all the cards over, and I reorganized them by theme. And then I saw that I had chapters around each of those themes. And I just consolidated all of the blog posts into these themed chapters and then realized there was a flow to the story. And basically what he said to me is, you already have written a book. If you put all of these blog posts into a Word document, how long is that? That's the length of a book. So if you think that you can't write a book, you've already written one. And then encouraged me to open up a second blank Word document and start writing instead. So I proved to myself first by doing this that I could do it because I already had. And then it also helped me organize my thoughts around these themes and see where the themes were that then really became my chapters in the book that I wrote from page one. So I would say there are a lot of creative ways to get yourself in the act of writing. And one was that kind of, creative process. The second thing was that he and I bartered, and I coached him 1 week, and the next week I owed him pages from my book. And so we back and forth. And so that was about, it took me about a year to write my first book and a year to get it ready for publishing. So it took about 2 years end to end. I self-published, so it was about editing. It was about getting the cover right and, getting it out into the world and planning the PR and marketing around it as well, which I would highly recommend you give yourself 3 to 6 months before launch to get ready for. So that really helped me because that deadline, that every other week deadline was a big one for me.
Wow. That's very helpful. And it's true. My journaling was done with the intention to write a book. So it was done around that. It was another coach had helped me with that, Matt Alfonso, who's been on the show as well. We had worked on that of my journaling would be towards the book and towards just speaking about my experiences and my challenges and building towards what I'm doing today and then what the future holds. So that is very, very helpful. In terms of coaching, I think this coaching has come up so many times in these podcasts. I've had so many great coaches on. Merritt's been on, Matt's been on, you're on now. Another Lauree was on as well from another coaching group. But then I've also had really great guests that speak to their coaches, like Heather Howley, who was on and speaks about her coach, and myself, right? But I think that there's this thing about coaches that if you don't have one, you don't really understand the value that they bring and how they help and how they really help organize your thoughts and hold you accountable. I remember one time, and I'll let you take the lead on this after I say this, but I remember this one time I reached out to the Tony Robbins coaching group and had an interview with them. And the guy goes, yeah, we hold you accountable. And at the time, I didn't understand what that meant. Right. And so I said, well, what do you mean you're going to hold me accountable? I mean, you're like in Michigan or somewhere, I'm in New York.
He's going to knock on your door.
Right. And he goes, well, I don't know. He goes, I'm going to make you cut me a check. And I'm like, how can I cut you a check? I don't even have any money to give you. I'm like, so it kind of fell flat on me. And so that's where I'm kind of like passing the baton on to you of like, I think so many entrepreneurs, business leaders, people out there that are listening right now, they hear us talking about coaching, but they don't really understand the significance, the importance, and how it really takes part in our journeys. And I just wonder if you could touch on that. Yeah.
So many things I could say about it. One is what got you here might not get you where you're going next. And usually through help, we're going to get there faster. The other thing is that where are the places that you get to think through an idea? Most of us won't take the time to do it because we're busy getting crap done, we're just getting it done day to day. And so where are the spaces in your life already where you get to think through an idea or decision or think bigger or plan for next year. Where are those spaces? Because if you're not taking them, a coach is a great way to do that. A coach is, I am committing this time, I'm committing this money, but I am investing this time in myself, in my business, in my idea. Even if you committed that time, well, a coach's help, but even if you committed that time and then went to a place by yourself, you would get more. But most of us need to commit to another person. Yes, the other person helps. So I'm not just a blank wall that you get to stare at, but it's committing that time.
Too.
Yes, it's that feedback. It's that it's ideas. It is challenging. Are you sure that idea is going to work? Are you sure you really want that, or you think you should because everybody, that's what this business is supposed to look like? How else can it work for you? One of the first things that I do with my clients is to envision the details, the basic minutia of your ideal work life. What are those aspects? Even if you don't know what you want to do next, even if you're working in corporate and you're not quite sure what the next position is for you, but it needs to be something better and different and more meaningful, more fulfilling, more difference making. That is enough for us to explore together. And we start with not the Googleable term of, I want to be a blank, and then I can look for that on Indeed or something. We start with, how far you want to commute in a day? Do you want to commute? How many people do you want to work with in a team? What are the qualities of a boss that you want? Or what are the qualities of staff that you want? And start with those pieces. When do you want to wake up in the morning? And build the ideal from there. So those are the kinds of questions we ask that most of us don't ask ourselves unless we're working with someone to reflect it back to us. So anyway, I could keep going.
You could keep going. And I think that speaks to that loneliness that a lot of entrepreneurs feel, is that I actually don't have that feeling. I remember watching a TED Talk about being an entrepreneur is lonely. And I remember watching that before I was an entrepreneur, and I was just like, oh man, I don't want to be lonely. And I was like,
but you've also developed a circle in order not to be.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what, It's, I have my coach, I have my social media, I have all these different people that my day is busy.
Right.
And people are like, what are you busy doing? I'm like, I'm meeting with all these different people because they're moving my businesses forward.
These people that you've consciously created to fill certain needs and also work together to lift up this idea that you have for your business.
All of that came from coaching.
Yeah.
It came from meeting with Merritt and having a regular session with her to where we started building that out. Who's that person that in your life that can fill that role? And actually Cecile was one of my first hires in that respect. Was I had met her in the chamber board. I knew what she did. And I said, hey, we need to have a meeting at some point. And, she was thinking about it as like typically in a chamber or any type of business association, one-to-ones, or just like, tell me about your business, I'm going to tell about mine, what kind of referral and all that, right? So we have our meeting. And I go, okay, cool. I go, so I just purchased, a 2-month subscription to your services. She's like, what? I go, yeah. So what do we start? She's like, well, usually I do like an interview and everything. I said, well, we're just starting now. So here's what I need. Let's get it done. Let's go. Because I just knew that's what I needed. And I knew she was the right person. She fit all of the pieces to your point of like, when I met with Merritt, who can fill that role? What do they look like without even knowing who Cecile was? When I meet her, boom, she fits that role. So then there's no question about it. That's the person, right?
Exactly.
But that came out of coaching. And I think just to speak on the accountability piece is just, it goes back to integrity of like, if I tell Merritt, if I tell my coach that I'm going to be doing something, next week she may not ask me about it, but I'm proud to tell her, here's what's happening with it. I've accomplished it, or actually we had to delay it, or whatever it was, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that I've, a couple of the things that I do with my clients is around looking at everything as research. As business leaders and business owners, everything is research. If there's this pressure on a decision or a shift around trying to get it right. So my clients are especially A students, and we like to get things right. And we don't often know what the right choice is, quote unquote, right choice. And so we'll be kind of frozen in, well, I can't do anything, or I can't make this decision if I don't know what the right choice is going to be, or if I don't know how this is going to work out, how this choice is going to work out. And so there's a lot of reframing in my work around, well, if this is research, what is the information we're already collecting that's going to help us make this choice now? And what are we learning through making this choice that then gets applied as more research later on? Mm-hmm. And so we're constantly information collecting and assessing it together. Because isn't it great working with people who can help you look at QuickBooks? You know, like if you have a bookkeeper, QuickBooks isn't as intimidating because somebody else can be like, well, you know, pay attention to this number, pay attention to this chart, and make this shift. Oh, okay, that's all I do with this, and that's really what we're doing. We're assessing the research, the information you're gathering all the time as a leader and an owner, and helping you make good choices out of it, or gather more information before you do make that choice.
And I think with what you're saying there, that also is what feeds into becoming a better leader. Mm-hmm. Because through that, what you're talking about, that kind of like being inquisitive, those open-ended questions, the self-awareness that you allow us to have as your mentee, I guess, in that moment. Then when we're working with partners, so I think about when you were saying all that, I'm thinking about when I'm collaborating with different partners, like Katie, who does my social media and is like, she's just phenomenal, right? Working with her, by working with Merit, when I work now with Katie, I have this open mind of like, when Katie asks me something, rather than me maybe internalizing it and going, well, what does that mean? I can then reflect the question back to her in a different light. And then we can have a much better conversation, which spawns more creativity, and just, it's a better leadership style too now, because rather than me dictating, saying, here's what I want, asking a question as if I'm Merit, right, to Katie or to Cecile or to any of my partners.
Right, you have new tools now.
Allows them now to open up their creative toolbox, right, and share. Yeah. And now I've just went from directing you in this one little piece to expanding it to everything you have to offer through a question that I learned in my coaching. Right. So it's phenomenal work. Shifting gears here to wrap this a little bit is you're doing a tremendous amount in your community. And for someone like myself who also takes part in our community, I want to make sure that I touch on everything you're doing because it's tremendous. So you are on the advisory board of the YWCA of Ulster and Dutchess counties. You're on the board of the Bardavon and UPAC theaters and its diversity and inclusion task force. And now the one that I just want to ask you a little bit about, because we did touch on this in the beginning, is the advisory board. You're starting the advisory board for Hudson Valley Women in Business. And this is significant work for you because this is something that you started. Yeah. Tell us about it.
Being on a board and starting a board, two very different things. Yes. And some of the names that you mentioned are actually on our board. I realized that we have grown, Hudson Valley Women in Business has grown to the point where it would help if I'm not the only decision maker, or if I can gather more information. So I have my own coach, but and who is helping me. But it's having other people who have experienced our community of 3,000 in different locations. So we have board members who are from different counties. I mean, there's so many counties in this region. We spread from Westchester and Rockland County up to Albany. So just the breadth of experiences based on where you live is
and the
different
needs in all these communities.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you add all of the different kinds of businesses. Like there are folks who own a restaurant versus a dog collar business versus an accountant. You know, your experience around business is going to be different. And so our board members need to be, have different experiences as a business owner. They're different years in business. They're different areas of this region where they're based. And so their experience of our community is different as a result. And that's what they're bringing to our board. And what I've noticed is I have to ask really good questions. And it's not unlike coaching, but it's a little different because coaching is so open-ended. My questions need to be very open-ended for folks like, what would be possible if you did something different here? my questions to the board are often like very specific on topic because they want to bring ideas that are going to be useful. So it's pricing or this event, we have our anniversary party every December. What do you think we should do for our anniversary party around this, around a venue? Like I ask some specific questions and then also the larger questions of what is the direction that we're going in or how does this mission fit with your experience of our organization? So I feel like I'm challenged in a new way to bring people in and empower them to take this in new directions. Not unlike having employees, but I would say also I'm required to be humble and to listen more. That as a business owner who has charted her own path for a long time and an only child who really likes to own things and does not like to share, shout out to the only children. It is a challenge to share and to have feedback around, oh no, I hadn't thought of that yet. Oh no, I haven't really added that into a budget line. Oh yeah, I should probably do that before our next board meeting. That is a humbling place and a good place. It's good sometimes to be humbled, especially by people that you respect and when there's mutual trust as well. So I've learned so much in the time that I've had this now. And
a bit of a loaded question here, but how good does it feel to see others take ownership of something you created? Oh my God. It's amazing. It is like, it makes it more real. This is just a concept, an idea, a solution that I was looking for. But when other people talk about it, even, the first time I hired a social media person or even a bookkeeper, it's like when someone else is talking about your business, it's like, oh, I hear about it through their lens. Like when somebody introduces me, even at a party or, networking event, and they describe my business, I learn something about my business when they talk about it. And so expand that to a board member, employees, or what have you. It's like when they're taking ownership and they're coming up with ideas. I mean, we've launched this interview series, interview the board member on our Instagram, and so board members interview and introduce each other, and that came up through the advisory board. Like they are running it, and I'm watching once a month when they do it. Like I don't even know what they're going to say. I'm like, oh, I hope they dug, they say something good, but it's so exciting because it means if it's real enough for them to want to talk about it, it's just incredibly fulfilling to me to see that. It's so cool. I'm going to talk about Take Action for a second here because you're going to be on the panel of our next our following Take Action event. But in our most recent one that we just did, we had 3 panelists. We had Merritt as one of them, Heather Howley as another, and Jeffrey Green. And I led the conversation as I should, right? And what was really cool was about midway through, you almost didn't need me there. Oh, yes. That's the best. And I was like, wow. That was the moment for me, was like, some people think that, as a podcaster, as somebody who's on YouTube and on videos and doing all this, and I speak a lot, and anybody who knows me personally goes, Michael's a talker, right? So you would be like, well, what do you mean that was your best moment? And for me, that moment where I literally sat back in my chair, and Jeffrey, Merritt, and Heather are just talking to the audience. Awesome. And they're just sharing. And I was like, this is the creation, right? Yeah. This is what I strive for. Someone has carried your idea and made it into something. Right. I mean, and the same thing happens here a lot too, where I know I've asked a good question, not when my guest tells me, but sometimes they do, which always feels good for the ego. But when my guest just takes off running, like you've done that a few times, you just take off running, and I look and I go 15 minutes in, wow, good job. Right. I love that. It just feels so good. So with that, I just want to share with everybody that August 3rd, 5:30 p.m. we have our Take Action Live event right at the Denizen Theater in New Paltz. We have an awesome panel coming on: George Gerard of Trivium Point. We have Janet Giannetta of Visions HR. And then we have Adrian Leiber of Hudson InfoSec, all business leaders who quit their 9-to-5 jobs to start their entrepreneurial journey. Our next Take Action event, Lauree will be leading the panel. of
Yay.
female women entrepreneurs, the industry. She'll be sharing her insights. We haven't rounded out the panelists yet with the other two. We'll certainly be discussing that, but stay tuned for details on that and just take a look at everything there. I want to end with your Athena Award.
Thank you.
A little accolade. I've learned through coaching that it's important to share our wins.
Yes.
We hear so much. We get beat up so much in our days. So we're going to wrap this episode up with your win, your feeling of the Athena Award, what that was all about. Just share with us what the Athena Award is and how you received it.
Oh, thank you. Well, so the Athena Award is an international award. The Dutchess County Regional Chamber of Commerce hosts our local Athena Awards, and it's for women leadership and allies as well. I think others have achieved it as well, and it's an incredible leadership award looking at women in corporate America and larger organizations and entrepreneurs who have made a difference in our region and our communities and led in these certain areas. So I think there are something like 8 areas, or community service being one of them, and others. And so they're looking at all of these overall concepts that become Athena Award winner. And so, that was so incredibly wonderful. That one took place during the pandemic, and so I was online, so it wasn't quite as exciting. But I did attend the most recent one, and was part of the committee that chose the next Athena Award winners. And I have to say that being able to be part of and welcome the next level of winners has this incredibly fulfilling, inspiring kind of thing that's like, oh, we're paving the way for others. And it feels like you're part of like a club or you're just surrounded by people who are like, that you're impressed by, and that you're like, wow, how do I get to be around this circle? It feels, I feel really lucky to be around them. That's fantastic. And I think thinking about your wins and some acknowledgement towards them, we don't do it for the acknowledgement, but it's well-deserved. Congratulations for your Athena Award. I'm scared and I'm doing it anyway. That's your mantra. And I'm so happy that you're doing it. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on today. This is my pleasure. Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.